What's up, Schmillville? Welcome to the second episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace, this is RB3, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite filmmakers right now, and probably the hottest filmmaker, at least for quality movies go, currently in Hollywood, and that is the French-Canadian man himself, Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah.
Now, this guy is a guy who, like I said in the beginning, has made some pretty spectacular movies. And we are very much excited to jump into pretty much all of his filmography. We're going to go from his release date. So we'll start with the one that he kind of did first. And then we'll go to the most current one, which is going to be a rival for us. I'm still super excited for Blade Runner 2049. But we're going to finish with Arrival, and we're going to start with actually a short film of his. But before we do that, we wanted to take some of your comments, which my bad, last week, because I completely forgot to do comments of Aronofsky. So what I want to do is, like I said before, Schmillville, I want to incorporate you guys as much as possible. So I want to make sure and do comments that you guys have on these filmmakers that I'm assuming you guys love as much as we do, because we're all film fans here. So let's read a few comments from Schmillville. Let's start with Rasika, because it's Rasika.
The guy's a G.
He says, what I appreciate about Aronofsky is that he's bold in his choices and isn't afraid to take risk. My favorite film of his is The Fountain, something that was met with mixed responses from critics, but I love the story he told and how he chose to tell that story. Drawing elements from different ideologies to tell his narrative was a risky move, but one that I love. You can see it with all his films. Whatever you think of him, formulaic isn't something you can use to describe him. Yeah, absolutely. He's always trying different things. He's very bold. I mean, like we spoke about it in the initial episode, the first one we did. Aronofsky is one of my favorite filmmakers, and I know he's one of RB3's as well.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, in my work, I take a lot from what I learned through his movies and able to incorporate a lot of stuff in the films that I make and the things that I do. In my pursuits in filmmaking, in terms of The Fountain, I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit.
About how much I love that movie?
You love The Fountain, yeah.
I love that movie.
And
I still think it's his most, I told you before, but I think it's his most ambitious movie.
yeah, it definitely is.
I think it's more ambitious than Mother, but that's me again.
Yeah.
Because everyone's talking about how crazy Mother is. I think The Fountain's way crazier.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard movie to grasp on. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not like, it's not one of my favorites, you know. I definitely have like some issues with it. Like, you know, it has this, you know, it's definitely like a very Aronofsky, like, oh, we're not gonna give you any information, just jump right into it. You know?
Then again, we're probably going to talk about one of those for Denny as well.
Oh yeah,
there is a movie from Denny that he does, and I'm assuming a lot of you guys know. That for me, I'm like, The Fountain is. This is 1 + 1 = 2 compared to this movie from Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah.
Let's read another comment from Nick Bosworth. He says about Aronofsky, he says he's a very ambitious director. I can't say I enjoy watching all of his films, but I'm glad I've seen them. They are very impactful and full of risk. Most of his films, however, are one and done for me. I appreciate the art, but it's too rough for a second watch, in my opinion, aka Requiem for a Dream. Yeah, you know, not everyone loves Aronofsky, obviously, and a lot of people have like a love-hate relationship with him because he makes movies that are, I don't want to say offensive, but they're very much like divisive is a better word for it. Like Mother, like Requiem. Those kind of movies that kind of hit you in a certain way that you're like, I don't appreciate being hit that way, Mr. Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah.
I don't like you slapping me around like that. So he makes very divisive films.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon of his that you could get a director that's so polarizing, but yet so acclaimed and praised. I think it just speaks like great about like the way he uses his camera, his editing. And, you know, it's funny, we kind of, you say, you know, you can't really watch Requiem for a Dream over, and, you know, and we got a lot of those comments. But we also got people who are like, oh, yeah, I could watch that movie.
Yeah, there was one guy who was like, oh, that movie's easy. I'm like, bro, stop it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because even with,
it hurts
like,
my soul, man.
It's so such destructive like behavior and stuff in there, but they're so entertaining to watch, man. Like I could like the first hour and a half of Requiem for a Dream, I could watch any day, all day. It's great, and then like once that like last sequence starts to hit, I'm like, you know, I might have to turn this off for a little bit.
Those last 20 minutes, you're
yeah,
like, wow,
yeah.
I'm good.
So, and I think that's a lot of his other films. You know, Black Swan is a very exhilarating, very captivating movie, and then it just kind of turns into like this really dark thing. And I think we talked about The Wrestler being like his most like leveled film,
Yeah,
and I
most
think
grounded
that's
movie.
yeah, and I think that's the one a lot of people can revisit a lot and digest a lot easier.
For
So
sure,
yeah.
for sure. There was another comment here by Lucas Bradley. He says, Noah is shockingly an all-time favorite of mine. The concepts and ideas he explores in the film are fascinating. He dives into so much that watching it multiple times is a must. Yeah, Noah is one that I definitely want to rewatch again. It's been a while for me. I remember initially diving into it and kind of appreciating everything, but yeah, it's crazy. An all-time favorite. That's definitely one that is another one that's kind of been split-ish with the critics. I know the audience is it's clearly not something
Yeah,
that connects with
it
the
ain't
audience, but
connect.
with the critics were like, I don't know how to view this movie. This is weird.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching that movie like opening weekend, and me and my friend and my friend's parent was like, "Really, you guys are gonna see Noah?" Like, I heard the reviews on that were just horrible. Like,
Yeah,
I was like, "Really?" I heard they were pretty great. So
yeah.
it was a weird phenomenon. I think Noah is definitely a movie that benefits a lot from rewatch, and because when I saw it initially, I was like, "Yeah, it's all right," but it works in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, once again, guys, we want to be taking more of your comments, so we'll be making posts in Schmelville, so make sure you're on that Schmelville post page. And we want to talk about more filmmakers that you guys enjoy as well. Let's jump into Denis. So Denis Villeneuve, like I said before, is a well-known French-Canadian director who I feel now is like the hottest filmmaker right now as far as like he's like the Michael Fassbender of directors, where everyone's like, "Who would be good in this role?" Michael Fassbender. Now it's like, who can make this movie? Denis Villeneuve. Like
Yeah.
everyone wants to see. Let's see a Denny version of Batman, a Denny version of like a superhero movie, a Denny version of like a Star Wars movie. People are always like, "Oh, Denny should make a Star Wars movie." He's very much like that director that everyone has at the tip of their tongue. I'll ask you the same question I asked for Aronofsky. What did Denis Villeneuve's films mean to you?
Well, in a lot of his movies, you see the idea of choice. You know what I mean? You see characters that are forced to in a really complex situation, and how do they choose to get out of that? How do they choose to move on past that? And I think the touch of his films is just like, he's really good at orchestrating like a psychological trap for his characters. Like they have to be in this position, and if the only way they could get out is choose an A or a B, the red pill or the blue pill. And I think that's really interesting cinematically because a lot of times, a lot of films are like, oh, this is by nature, this is what life is, this is what how we should passively move through it. And then the news films is like, no, you have to make a choice. And that choice is gonna like make or break like the psyche of this person. So I think that's really interesting. I love all of his movies pretty much. I can't really think of one that like stands out as like a bad movie or anything. They all are really
Yeah.
powerful, very
Which is rare
emotional.
in a filmmaker, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
really rare.
and
Like even like you said, even Aronofsky made some ones where you're like, nah.
mhm.
But for me, I like all of Aronofsky's. But Denny makes you every single one of them you can watch and be like, damn, that's a really good movie.
Yeah, yeah, and even if the subject material is dark, because a lot of his
All of
movies
his
are
movies are dark.
very dark.
Pretty
Yeah.
much all of his movies are dark. Yeah.
But it says something about the society we live in. It says something. It always has commentary, always has meaning, and can always provoke discussion. So I always appreciate that in a filmmaker.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then once again, guys, if I'm gonna repeat myself a lot, but one thing that I want to make sure we know is that this is our personal identification with the film. Not everything we say might necessarily be what the filmmaker initially wanted to say. Not everything we say might be what you got from the movie. There's definitely going to be one Denny film that I'm going to talk about more personally than necessarily what the filmmaker wanted to say, but more what I got from the movie. You're going to get a lot of our interpretations of the meaning of Denis Villeneuve's films. And let's jump into one that you mentioned to me. This is a short film from Denny. It's called Next Floor,
Yes.
and this is a 10-minute short,
Hmm.
and it's something that you can find anywhere. I found it on Vimeo, to be honest. I
found it
just
on
typed
Vimeo?
in Next Floor and it's on Vimeo.
Yeah.
And this is pretty early on in his career. Denny makes a lot of shorts. I think he has like 4 shorts maybe that he
Yeah.
has out there. But you really wanted to bring this one up, so I'm going to let you talk about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I was really like when we picked Denis Villeneuve as our next topic. I was like, Okay, I want to talk about his movies, but I really want to talk about this short because if you want to watch this short, Next Floor, it's on, like you said, Vimeo.
Yeah,
It's on Film Shrug.
it's 10 minutes or 8 minutes. It's super
Yeah,
short.
it won about 40 awards at a bunch of different film
It did
festivals.
win
It's
a
very
ton.
acclaimed.
Yeah.
And I think that this is probably one of his first like pokes at like a political kind of satire-ish kind of deal. What it basically is it's a short of it's a lot of like big cats like aristocrats or whatever just like eating food, and it's literally just them eating food, and they're being served like the most disgusting like animals or whatever it is. I don't really know what they're eating, but and the servers are just serving it to them, and then out of nowhere their long table of all these aristocrats just like fall to the ground, fall like to like a floor underneath, and the waiters like all follow them downstairs. And I'm like, what? This is weird. But they just keep eating. Like they don't stop. Like they just
Yeah.
continue as normal. And then it happens again and again and again and again. I'm like, whoa, this is a trip. And eventually towards the end, they just like keep barreling down like down to like the depths of the earth. And I just think it's a really interesting commentary on like the hierarchy of like wealth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These cats could sit at the top. They could eat, and you have these servants who are just they're serving them and will follow them down to every floor. And I think it's a piece. It came out in 2008, obviously. We know Denis Villeneuve's Canadian, French Canadian, but this came out during the time of the economic crisis in America. And I think this speaks a lot towards that, right? Like the class discrepancy, the way like the hierarchy can fall like rapidly, but nothing will change for the guys on top.
Yeah, that's good.
But everything will change for the guys on the bottom, right? So I just thought it was like, wow, this is one of the most thought-provoking, kind of one of the simplest concepts I've ever seen, but has so much to say, and I think that speaks a lot to Villeneuve's like filmography.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously his direction of that is top notch.
Yeah, it's a very weird movie, like the way it's
Yeah.
directed. There's a lot of like zooms, a lot of like crazy music.
The sound of the plates. I saw this short and I couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, I feel like throwing up, man. This is just gross. It's super. It's supposed to be very gross. But yeah, you're right. It has a lot to say about kind of the gluttony of the higher class society, is how much they have. And they've had enough, and they're clearly in pain of how much they've eaten.
Yeah.
And yet they choose to eat more. There's one scene in particular where they've just gone down like the fourth time or something like that.
Right.
And they're just in so much pain, not just from the falling, but just from how full they are
Yeah.
of how much they've eaten. And then one guy looks at the other guy. One rich guy looks at another rich guy, and he looks at him, and he's almost like, oh yeah, I'm gonna eat more than you, bro. Like, he's
Yeah.
just, like,
It's a
he's
competition.
He's
Yeah.
competing with him as far as like how much more he can eat, and it's a hard watch. It's very much a hard watch, but you're right. It has a lot to say about society and how much people are willing to take so much that they're in pain of how much they have.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And again, we don't normally talk about shorts on here, but I was like, this is something that anybody could watch. Everybody has access to.
It's more of a recommendation.
It's
It's
a
more like, hey,
recommendation,
check it
yeah.
out. We're not giving pretty much anything away. It's like the first
Yeah.
2 minutes of the short.
Yeah.
So we definitely recommend checking that one out as well. I say we jump into more of his filmography, and then we'll discuss his filmmaking tactics as we go along. Do you feel
Yeah.
like that's cool?
Yeah, that's perfect. And
Yeah.
obviously he has that film Polytechnic.
Oh, yeah, Polytechnic.
We're not really going to talk about that one
No,
that
we're
much.
not.
Yeah.
Sorry, because I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's kind of impossible to
disclosure.
find people. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's hard to find that movie. And it's also like just kind of like a short, like black and white.
It is.
Thing,
It's
so.
very short. It's like 100 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's a feature, but it's barely a feature kind
Yeah.
of thing. And I kind of wanted to talk about his feature films, and I know you wanted to talk about that short as well.
Yeah. So.
Before we jump in, actually, let me. If I have one thing to say about Denny, we'll talk about it more going ahead. But for me, the thing that makes Denny one of the greatest directors working in Hollywood right now, and I will clearly, unabashedly say that, is his genius with pacing. I think he is a master at pacing. He paces scenes, and he paces all his films, and he creates tension, he creates moments, he creates character desires through pacing, and it's done so well. And I feel like pacing is something that everyone mentions, but I don't really know if they know what it means. But it's something that is so crucial in filmmaking, right? Because if something is paced just long enough, because all his films have a touch of like, if he cut if he waited even 5 seconds more, you would be like, this is too long. It's
Yeah,
too long. He
exactly.
drags things out just at the right point where you're just like, we get it. Oh wait, okay, that was perfect because he pulls things out, and all his movies have like a very long feel, like a long build up feel. Whether it's Sicario or Prisoners or any of those movies, they have moments in the film where you're just like, you feel so much of it because they focus so much of one scene on one moment, and you're just like feeling the weight of it. And that's all done and through his pacing. That's one of my favorite things he does.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what he does is like a master class of like editing, right? You can look at his films and you can kind of like just learn what the idea of tension is. We're gonna talk about Sicario a little later.
Yeah.
But that bridge scene in that movie is like they teach that in like film schools.
Yeah.
Like
They actually have.
look at how the cut breakdown here is like this last 9 seconds. It goes to 4 seconds, 3 seconds, then it goes frame by frame. So it's
They're literally teaching Denny in school.
yeah, and then you can
That's
even,
how good he is.
and you could look at a lot of like different video essays about I mean people. It's crazy how much his work is just like influenced like a new generation of like neo-realism stuff like because he borrows a lot. We talked about Aronofsky last week, kind of being like a formalist, kind of an experimental, expressionist kind of filmmaker. Denis Villeneuve's like almost kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
He relies a lot on the realism, the grittiness, the focus on character and story, and not really so much like the flashy filmmaking and stuff, but really building, like you said, towards the tension and stuff like that. So
Yeah, he does that so well for sure. Let's jump into his films. One of his first films that came out was a movie called Incendies, and Incendies is one that not a lot of people talk about, mainly because it's in French, right? It's a
Right.
French movie. Well, it's not it's the language is French, right? But it takes place in Canada. So let's talk to you guys about this movie. If you haven't seen it, that's okay. We'll kind of talk about the meaning of it without getting too much into the details of the spoilers. But this is what we want to do is kind of almost pitch Incendies to you. So basically, Incendies is about twins who just found out that their mother died. This is all in the first literally 10 seconds of the movie.
Yeah.
And in the will of their mother says, "Hey, by the way, before you bury me, my will is that you can't bury me," is what she says,
Right.
unless you find your long lost brother and your long
father.
lost dad.
Yeah.
And they're like, "What do you mean long lost brother? You never told us we had a brother, and you told us our dad died. So why are you making us do this?" Is kind of the whole thing. But basically, it's the mother grew up in a very war-torn Palestine, I believe is what it was.
Well, they don't specifically name the country. They have Palestine. You see, like
That's the only reason why I
yeah.
say Palestine.
You see it in windows and stuff, but they don't specifically say it's Palestine.
They
which is
don't.
weird because I had to like look up a bunch of like reviews and editorials, like where does this actually take place? And a lot of people are like, it doesn't take place in Palestine. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess they shot it in Jordan.
Okay.
So I guess like that's
Cool.
also.
Yeah,
and-
thanks for the correction, because I assume it's Palestine based on that sign that says Palestine.
Yeah.
But there's not really, they don't really say what country it's in, but you know it's in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And you know that there's a war going on in the Middle East between, at least in this country, between Christians and Muslims. And it's very like extreme Christians and extreme Muslims to the
Right.
point of extreme violence that we see so much in the Middle East. And we see basically a parallel journey, which I love about the movie, because it's a parallel journey with the children and the mother. So it's the mother when she was younger, and basically it's the origin story of the mom, and then it's the daughter, mainly the daughter, but the son towards the end, who kind of goes on this journey to find out what the mother's backstory is, and then it cuts to the mother's backstory, and we go back and forth between the daughter trying to find out about the mom's backstory and the actual mother's backstory of what all the shit she's been through in her life growing up in a war-torn nation filled with war, violence, terrorism, and just awful acts of humanity and decisions that she has to make that are very, personal and very destructive to her. Essentially, what I really like about the movie, besides, I like the structure of it. I like that it's a parallel journey. I like that the first cut that they have with the flashback of the mom, I didn't even notice it. I legit thought it was still the daughter. I was like, what's the daughter doing? Oh, that's the mom. It's a flashback to the mom. And then it cuts back to the daughter, and then it cuts back to the mom. I thought the structure of the movie is probably, besides the performances and the the ending, is the thing that stands out the most. It's a different type of structure. It's a parallel journey, but it's also like a book. It has chapters in it, right? And they actually say the chapters. They have names
Yeah.
of the chapters, and it's almost like a 8 chapter book inside a movie. What do you think of this movie, man? Because I know it's something that it's different for you, right? Because you've seen this one recently.
Yeah, I literally was like watching this in the car on the way
Yeah,
here. It's a crazy movie. I think it obviously focuses on like the geopolitics of like what is could be happening in this Middle Eastern thing, Middle Eastern country that it takes place in. Again, like I'm not exactly sure where it takes place.
sure.
I've even heard like conflicting reports like the play takes place like not in Palestine. So I don't know. I'm not sure the play that's based on at least. You know it kind of and again we see this a lot in Villeneuve's films, but it's about these ordinary people kind of trapped in this like extraordinary world
Yeah,
that is real, is gritty, is violent, is war, you know, and how especially when you see like the mother's backstory, it's like
it's awful.
yeah, and she's trying to go to university. She's trying to, you know, find relationships and connections, and she's trying to just live life. But in the meantime, there's this whole big war waging against like Christianity, Muslims, refugees who are like trying to come in, and we even see that scene early on where like I guess it was her brother, right, or somebody who just like she was with like a refugee, and they just like shot him point blank.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy how like how just nuts this world is, this environment is, and that's real life. I mean,
and
that's what a lot of people
and it's
experience.
a daily experience for many people in the Middle East, where it's like they're going through hell, literally. They're going through war, literally, whether they're a part of the war or not, whether they pick a side or not, whether they're on a different side or on another side. There's violence on both sides. We see that very clearly in the movie. That's something that stood out to me, was the fact that there's so much war. It's crazy how much she phases back and forth, and even towards the end of the movie, you see the phase back and forth of like, what side are you on? I don't know, whatever side gets me, I guess, right? Because she
Right.
starts out, she's like, I'm Christian, I love the Lord, and this, oh wait, no, well, these people did that. Well, maybe I can work for the Muslims. Oh wait, the Muslims just bombed this thing. Well,
Yeah.
maybe I could. It's just like she's on whatever side offers her a side. She's
Yeah.
on whatever side offers her peace and just peace of mind, really.
Yeah, and there's no clear answers, right? Like there's no good guy, no bad guy.
Yeah.
Um,
It's mainly to show, at least what I felt was to show the how extreme violence on both sides goes. How there's not really a side you can take that this is the good side because they fight with no violence, with peace, and with just no. They both fight with extreme violence and with extreme war, and they both commit horrific acts and they both commit good acts. It's awful on both sides. It really is. There's not really a clear choice there. One thing that stood out to me very much in the movie was that the daughter of the mother, who's going on this journey, she's like a super expert, extreme mathematician.
Yeah,
And I thought
right.
that was so cool because there's a scene where she's in math class and she's like a CA or a teacher in math class. A teacher's assistant in math class in a university, and the mathematician who's the professor of it is like this, super wise old guy, introduces the class as pure mathematics, and he goes on to say, welcome to pure mathematics. This is the most insane mathematical course you will ever take. You will attempt to solve problems that are unsolvable. You will completely destroy your social life. Welcome to pure mathematics. This is your teacher. And then she
Right.
comes out and you're like, damn,
Yeah.
I would never want to take that class.
Right.
But the professor and the daughter have a really good interaction where the daughter says, hey, my mom just told me that I have a brother I never knew, and I have my dad is still alive, and she wants me to go find him, and I just can't keep getting it out of my head. And he says, you're a genius mathematician. Solve this problem.
Right.
This is your, solve your X, solve your Y. This is your math equation that you are such a genius in math. Use this as a math equation. Try to solve life in a mathematical way. You use your expertise to try and solve it. And at the end of the movie, I don't want to spoil it because I really want you guys to see it if you
Yes.
haven't. She can't.
Yeah.
She finds out that some things in life don't mathematically add up, and that's why there's a line in the movie that the brother says, 1 + 1 can never equal 1, right? And then she just is so confused by that because some things in life are just so horrific and so bad that you can't mathematically try to solve it in a logical way. Some things just don't make logical sense because life can be so cruel sometimes. that even your genius expertise or even things in the world that you think would make sense, sometimes just the world is so against you that you're not going to find that answer. I thought that
Right.
was so fascinating that she's this mathematician trying to solve a problem, and at the end she solves it, but not she doesn't solve it in a mathematical way.
Yeah.
What she thought she would.
Right, right, and I think this attests to the fact that a lot of like Villeneuve's characters are people who are really smart and really good at what they do, almost like experts. I mean,
That
she's a math. If you watch this movie, she knows like this crazy like problem and equation that even like people who were like involved in the movie, like like didn't really know like a solution to that. Had to bring in like real mathematicians to like help out with just like this little detail, and it's the fact that they're able to nail down these fine little details with each and every character that they have here is great. And like you said, they're able to use their intelligence to find the answer or not find the answer.
Yeah.
No, it's hard to always apply what your field of expertise is to anything. And I think particularly in the case of Incendies, is like, oh no, it's not as straightforward as that. You have to
Yeah.
look a little deeper. Everything's not going to be showed to you, and I think that's one of the brilliant things about Villeneuve is like he's treating his characters like he treats the audience.
Yes.
We're not going to give you every answer to the question you have.
Yeah.
We're not going to show you. We're not going to give you clues here and there. It's not like a traditional movie because when you really think about it, it's almost like it's like a war movie mixed with like a noir kind of thing, right? It's like searching, finding these details, mystery, yeah. So, but unlike most films, it's not like the pudding is right in front of you. You have to search and you have to look, and even looking into the mother's backstory, you kind of see some echoes of what you might see coming down the line towards the ending. But in the end, it's like you have to be paying attention. You have to be watching this movie in order to like get it, and I think that's really impressive.
And that's something that we see kind of in all Denis films. As far I like what you said about real quick. I like what you said about Denis. Almost all his movies feature an expert in something. That's so true. We see that in Arrival with Amy Adams as an expert. Jeremy Renner is an expert.
Right.
It's like they're the top of the top of whatever field they're in. I think that's super cool because we get to see the mind of someone else. How do they go about life in a different way when you're a language expert, like in Arrival, or science, or a mathematician,
or Sicario,
or Sicario when you're a professional killer, right?
Right.
I think that's really cool, but I like how all of Denis' films kind of have like a circular thing.
Yes.
The beginning is the end. The end's the beginning.
Yes.
Kind of all that whole. We see that in Incendies too.
Yeah.
With kind of like little details towards the beginning and little details towards the end that come full circle. All of Denis' films have a theme of circle, pretty much.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about
that
more
quite
in
a bit.
Prisoners. Yeah.
But it really is all. He doesn't like that linear beginning and Denny doesn't like that, and he said that before in many interviews. He says he likes the circular structure of not just pretty much all his films have a circular structure.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely fascinating. But yeah, that's last word on Incendies for me is that my biggest takeaway is obviously seeing everything that people go through to try and reach peace. That's one thing, and then the second thing is what I said before about how a mathematician tries to solve a problem of life using mathematics or using the concepts of mathematics, and she realizes that sometimes it doesn't add up, literally.
Right, and for me in Incendies, I mean, obviously it's an acclaimed film. It was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film when it came out, and I think this movie indicates a lot of like the themes of geopolitics, what the relationship to people in war is, who are like living in these war-torn Middle Eastern countries. Or just like war-torn countries in general. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be just the Middle East, but there's obviously problems throughout the world, which is devastating. But in narrowing in on like these specific characters, you really get to see how impactful and how dangerous and how remorseful you end up in the end of like these are the conditions that we have to live with.
Yeah,
so it's
absolutely.
fascinating.
Let's move on to his next release, which you think would be Enemy, but it's actually Prisoners.
Yeah.
So let's go in order just because. Prisoners. Let's go to Prisoners. This movie is crazy. This movie's insane. Honestly, it's between this one and Arrival for me as my favorites, and it's between this one and Arrival for me as like perfect films. Like legit.
Okay.
They're perfect films. As far as like, I don't know how Denny's ever going to top himself. I mean, I guess he kind of does in different ways, but he does it in different genres. Prisoners to me is just a testament in acting. It's a testament in so many different things. But the main thing that stands out to me in Prisoners, and as you guys have probably seen this movie, Hugh Jackman's in it, Jake Gyllenhaal, Terrence Howard, Viola Davis. It's a great cast. But the thing that really stands out to me is the concept of faith,
Yeah.
the concept of morality and faith, and how, again, we talked about faith quite a bit last week with Darren Aronofsky, but how I was thinking about it. Besides, doing this whole study of Denny and doing this whole study of all these movies, I kind of go in and out of dreams with it and stuff. I just freaking obsess over these guys so
You
much.
become like Amy Adams.
Become Amy Adams.
Yeah.
I can see the future, guys. But I started to realize that what is to stop me from doing certain things, and this is me personally, right? This is me watching TV or just watching sports and watching commercials and thinking to myself, what is to stop me from doing something against that I personally, my flesh desires it, I guess you can say, but my heart stops me, or what is it that stops me from having no inhibitions and just going beyond my way? And for me personally, it's my faith, right? It's my walk with the Lord, I guess you can say. And for a lot of people, that's what it is. I mean, not for everyone, but that's what it is for a lot of people. And that's that concept that Denny has in this movie, whereas Hugh Jackman has, very, very much in his faith, very, very much grounded in his faith, and that's usually what stops him from committing atrocities. However, he drops it, or almost uses that in a way to justify his atrocities, in a way to almost like step over the boundaries of morality and still be okay with his faith, and almost just see that as like a testament of God, where it's like, I'm doing this because God allows me to break these rules in times of extreme need. I think that's just so fascinating between your faith, your inhibitions, and your morality, right? Because that's what keeps people balanced, is like, I'm not going to commit these awful acts of sin because of my faith.
Right, exactly. And like you said, of course, Prisoners deals a lot in the idea of faith, religion, particularly with the Hugh Jackman character being representative of a man who is so gun-ho to his faith and his religion, and how this tragic situation of just losing his daughters brings him to this breaking point of like, he has to kind of abandon that stuff. And we don't know a lot about his past. We get some glimpses knowing that his father committed suicide.
Yeah.
We know we know very little about him, basically, but we know he has a thing for alcoholism. So, and seeing in the context of the story, it's like, is he reverting back to his old ways? Is he ditching Christianity in general? But meanwhile, we have this character of Loki, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, Detective Loki, who is non-religious, who wears Freemason rings, who has like satanic, not satanic, but like Freemason tattoos on his neck.
7-star tattoo, right?
Yeah. So it's, he
8-star tattoo, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so a lot of that is Freemason, iconography that is all about, searching for an institution or being free of an institution. But meanwhile, he's kind of on a path of self-discovery himself. I don't know if it's necessarily faith, but it's definitely a form of belief that he's looking for, and that he has to interpret in order to crack this case. At the same time, where we have this overarching antagonist towards the end, like the big bad guy is like literally the devil, right?
Yeah.
Like, she has snakes. She's putting these kids on LSD to like dream of
snake venom.
Yeah, snake venom. Yeah, it's
as she says that she's in a war with God.
Yeah, exactly. So it's strange that, and obviously we have the other cast members like Paul Dano, and I can't exactly remember who plays the other son in the film of the.
Oh yeah, lady. He's a great actor, but I forget his name.
Yeah, he was in the Dark Knight.
Yeah, he was in the Dark Knight Rises.
And
Dark Knight, sorry.
Yeah, he's great, and I think that overall we see hints of like symbolism that kind of talks to the ideas of faith and belief in religion.
Yeah, that's why I got a lot I got a lot out of this movie because of that, because it resonates with me so much with faith. Hugh Jackman's character, there's a scene when he has Paul Dano in the shower,
Yeah.
and he keeps burning him, and there's a scene where he literally takes a knee and he's like, God help me, and I'm like, dude, what God? You're burning this guy, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you're seriously like praying to God right now to be like, hey man, just Jesus, please help me right now, and I'm like, dude, you're burning a guy.
Yeah.
You're committing something that's so awful and so just against God, pretty much, and yet you're praying to him as if you're doing his will somehow.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because it's like I said before, using moments to justify your sin, right? Where it's like, if my daughter is kidnapped by some sort of psychotic weirdo, you bet your ass I'm gonna kick
Right.
some people's ass,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
But it's almost to the point of like, can you do that, right? In the faith of the Lord, can you push boundaries if boundaries against you are pushed? Does God give you a free pass somehow? You know what I'm saying? Like, that shouldn't be the case whatsoever, and yet that's what he feels in the movie, is that I do have a free pass because I'm confronted with something that's so demonic in nature, right? With people who kidnap children, that to combat these satanic, demonic people, I have to let go of a lot of my Christian morality and use tactics that they would use. I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean,
Right.
it's one of those concepts of like holding on to your faith. What does that mean to you?
Yeah.
Does that mean, committing things that you feel are necessary and going above the law? Because a lot of this movie is about the law, right? Going to because Loki represents the law.
Right.
He represents doing it
Law
by
and order.
Law,
Yeah.
law and order, cop, procedure, detective, going as far as you're allowed to go, somewhat. And Hugh Jackman represents going out of the law, going vigilante mode,
Right.
going too far, pretty much.
And and we see a lot of like those themes in the film, whether it be through like the use of mazes. Again, it all goes back to the idea of the psychological trap. Like, you're trapped in what your mind is going to limit you to, or what your capacity is going to limit you to, what your occupation is going to limit you to. And that's definitely, I think, the case here, where you see all of these men are kind of trapped by what they believe in and how they're breaking out of that. Paul Dano and the other son are very like trapped in like mentally like disabled. Like, they're literally like trapped, like boys trapped in men's bodies because of the drugs and all the stuff that their mother, who's
It's psychological torture as
right,
well.
psychological torture. Yeah, exactly. And we see him using like the use of mazes, trying to get out of his mind. You know what I mean? And obviously the maze is a symbol that comes from Christian and pagan belief, initially, as a form of
I know it from the Greek mythology.
yeah, Greek
the
mythology
centaur.
as well. Yeah, the centaur and the minotaur and whatnot. And I mean, it represents a lot. And you even see with Jake Gyllenhaal's character, like Loki. His name is Loki, coming from like a Norse god.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I can't lie. Watching this movie the first time, he's like, I'm Loki. I'm like, Loki.
You Thor's brother. What's happening here? Like, yeah.
Your mom named you Loki?
Yeah.
That's one thing that stood out to me more. But that's very much Denny being like, I'm making this very obvious. But go ahead and explain Loki. Yeah.
Yeah, he the name comes from like the Norse,
god, obviously.
Norse god who is a trickster, obviously, but it sometimes goes and serves other gods, and it's not like what you see in like the Thor movies or like the comic books. It's different. And what is he goes to different gods and services them, try and find something that they're looking for, and might play tricks, but it's also
Loki represents, at least to me personally, you're studying on Loki, represents more gray, right?
Yeah.
Less black and white, more gray.
And I think that's the theme of
of Loki's character, Jake Gyllenhaal's character in the movie, is that he's very much not black and white. He's not extreme one way, extreme the other. He represents kind of the middle ground of like using tactics that if they might be above the law, slightly above the law, but never going too far. He always has that middle ground that he's kind of trying to walk the path of that.
And again, I think that plays into like the Freemason stuff with the rings and whatnot. Is like he doesn't have an institution. He's just serving himself. Not serving himself, but he's using his own beliefs and principles to serve other people. And that's how he ultimately, and when he comes to a point of discovery, when he like actually finds like the antagonist, he's like literally blinded. He gets shot in the eye, like, so it's like, It is a gray area, and I think that's what even is reflecting like the beautiful like cinematography from like Roger
Oof.
Deakins.
Ooh, that cinematography is so good.
Yeah, and you see like the color palette is always bleak. It's always a little like slightly toned into like a gray. There's no real like use of black or whites, but you see like the darkness and the light. I think that's what reflects a lot more. The use of lighting, like top lighting, side lighting, to kind of minimal lighting to tell the story in a way that you're vividly painting these characters in the world in a very bleak, like downbeat way, but the environment in total is just like, it paints a picture and a mood to get you to understand what these characters are going through. So
Yeah, it's so funny because this movie is one of those movies that is very, at a surface level, you see it's a dad trying to find his daughter and a cop trying to find him and going above the law. It's way deeper than that.
yeah,
It's one of the most deep movies, actually. I mean, if we can have a whole podcast about it, I would, because it deals so much with humanity, with morality, with faith. Because I do feel like Loki or Jake Gyllenhaal's character is kind of on a faith journey in a
he
very
is.
different way.
Yes.
In a faith that in the faith that he believes in, that he feels what is right and what is wrong. I feel like that's kind of his journey throughout the movie, is finding out what his faith is, in a sense, right? One thing I do want to say is the antagonist in this movie, the bad guy in this movie, is something that's so interesting because the couple starts out as like they lose their son to cancer, and then they kind of take that as like a message of like, if God is willing to let my son die of cancer, I'm gonna go far. And what her concept is, the evil woman in this story, is that she says that once she kidnaps the kids, the true evil nature of their parents come out, and that's kind of the war they wage with God is what she calls it in the movie. It's her way of demonizing people and taking it's almost like taking people from heaven, right? Because
Right.
it's like, this guy has a path to heaven. I'm going to take away his path to heaven by breaking him down so much emotionally and morally, by literally kidnapping his kid. And that's his moral ground. That's what represents your moral ground. That's what represents the thing that keeps you sane, is your child, right? If someone takes that away from you, you all of a sudden lose your morality, almost lose yourself, and almost lose your way to heaven, right? Almost
Yeah.
lose your relationship with God, because you're so hurt and so destroyed by losing something so pure and so precious like a child. Because that's what a child represents. It represents purity. It represents innocence. And if you break the innocence in a parent, what happens to you? And I felt like that's so hardcore evil. Like I don't know how you felt in the movie, but I was just like, I just the fact that someone is kidnapping kids, destroying them mentally, and then using snake venom to fucking kill them. Like,
Yeah.
it really gets you mad, right? Because that's kind of the concept of breaking people down to the point of, like I said before, almost like in a demonic way, almost in a way of they're serving the devil by doing these atrocities to these parents. And it's felt so much with Hugh Jackman's character.
And you see it all the way up until the end, where Jackman does break all of his morals. He breaks everything, and he ends up getting buried in like a literal hell. You know what I mean? He literally is underground. He can't get out, and I think that's very powerful. I don't know if he's saying like that in the end, evil is gonna win out, good is gonna win out. The gray area that's represented in Detective Loki wins out. What is the point? And you never know. You never fully understand. I think that's the point.
But as a, I believe that for sure. But I also, me personally seeing the movie and me seeing it through my POV, my eyes, my point of view, and my positioning towards of it, is like, maybe that is God's way of answering his prayer. The last prayer that Hugh Jackman says is, God, please let my daughter be okay. Please let her be safe. That's all he wants. If I gotta die, God, if I gotta lose myself for my daughter to be okay, then I'm okay with that, God. If I need to die and if I need to starve to death in this cave, as long as I know that my daughter's okay, or as long as she's okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And in a way, God did answer his prayer with Loki, right? Because his daughter was okay. She is gonna make it out alive. That's something we find out at the end of the movie, is that she's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And then now he can know that God did answer his prayer, and in a very extreme, in a very muddled way, but in a way, it's like, yeah, I mean, all this stuff that you did, and as horrible as it was, but at the end of the day, God heard your prayers. You're still getting punishment for what you did, but at the end of the day, God is not going to take it out on that little girl. He's going to let that girl be saved by Jake Gyllenhaal's character of Loki, who was willing to stay within the morality of morals and of the law, right? So he's not willing to go outside the law because he thought Hugh Jackman's character thought that going outside the law will make it okay, but Jake Gyllenhaal's character knew that working within his own boundaries and his own faith, of keeping himself centered, he was able to find that little girl and save that little girl.
Right, and we see a lot of ways that we could point to that. I remember reading an interview with Jake Gyllenhaal where he talks about the thing that makes Denis Villeneuve so great as a director is his attention to detail. Just like every single frame means something to the story, to the characters, and we see it even when like they're driving and he has the cross on in the middle, and then when things start to get a little shaky, the cross starts shaking, it's tilted sideways, and again the attention to detail and finding those little pieces. And we talked again about the tattoos and the rings and what those might represent, but we don't necessarily have the answers to that.
We
but
don't know.
Yeah, and it's just it's interesting.
It's
that
little details because I think he has a tattoo on his hand, a cross,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Loki does. Jake Gyllenhaal's
Loki,
character,
yes.
yeah, and which also confuses it because then you see, like you said, the ring and you see the neck tattoo, which stands out like crazy, right? Because if you see a guy with a neck tattoo, you're like, damn, bro,
Yeah.
you got a neck tattoo,
Right,
and then the cross tattoo on his hand too, it kind of throws things off because you're like, wait a minute, you have that crazy star and then you have a cross.
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to represent. Personally, this is what I'm getting out of it is the concept of keeping your faith, right? Whether it's the Christianity, whether it's the star, whether it's the ring, it's keeping it, right? It's
Right.
making sure you stay firm in what you believe in, and that
Right.
and have faith that it's gonna turn out in a good way, whether everything in the world is going against you.
Right, and there could be multiple interpretations
Yeah.
on that too.
Yeah.
I mean, what I kind of take away is that maybe nailing yourself down to an ideology maybe isn't the best idea.
Okay.
Maybe for Loki's character, just kind of like being amongst his free will, but also like staying loyal to like the laws of the land. He's able to find self discovery, and that he finds the little girls, but he's also like finding what the meaning of like what he's starting to believe in. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think it all comes down to, I think, an interesting quote that Denis Villeneuve has in one of the, I believe, the commentary of the movie. He says, the whole point of the film is not to show but to suggest, and I think that's really what
That's
they're
really
going
good.
for here. So
Yeah, I love this movie, and obviously, as far as the filmmaking wise goes, it's incredible as well. Any last word on Prisoners?
no, it's a brilliant movie. Obviously, it was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. We talked about Roger Deakins being nominated for that, and we're going to talk about Sicario.
Oh yeah, we're gonna talk about some DP action.
Right,
Some
right,
cinematography action.
right.
Yeah, cool. Let's move on to his other film that followed this one, which is one that he really wanted to make.
Yeah.
That's Enemy,
Enemy, yes.
with starring Jake Gyllenhaal, and I feel like this film,
Yeah.
out of all his films, you're very much like, holy crap, what is going on?
Yeah, it's a trippy movie.
This
to
is
say the
by
least.
far his most experimental movie. It's by far his most bizarre. It's by far his most open to interpretation. His more symbolic movie. The whole movie is almost an encapsulation of the mind, right? It's supposed to represent consciousness and subconsciousness, and it's supposed to be kind of a battle that's going on between the battle inside the mind of Jake Gyllenhaal's character.
Right.
What do you think of this movie, Enemy?
It's a cool movie, man. I mean, it's difficult. It's a trippy. There's
It
a
is.
lot. There's a lot to dissect in it.
Because going in fresh, I feel like I want to preface this by saying, sorry to interrupt you, I'll let you continue, but I went in super fresh in this movie. I don't know about you, but there's a lot of people that don't go in fresh in this movie and going kind of knowing what's going on. I didn't, so I just want to hear your
No, I
thoughts
mean,
on that.
I definitely like heard a lot of the buzz around it
Got it.
beforehand. I knew the whole spider thing was a prevalent thing. I mean, I still don't. I kind of the spider. I think. Well, first off, just overall as a movie, I think the whole idea of having like the actor Jake Gyllenhaal character and a history teacher. I think they're just one and the same. I think that's pretty straightforward. I think they even tell you as much in the movie.
They do, yeah.
And
And I
they're
mean, and they've said it a million times. They're like, yeah, it's the same person.
Yeah, and there's a quote from Denis Villeneuve where he says, "The film is a documentary of my subconscious." So he's definitely like exploring like what the subconscious wants, the needs versus the desires. What we lust for over what we sustain by, and I think that's definitely like a prevalent theme. And whether or not we're gonna talk about the spiders, I
Sure,
guess.
we have to.
Yeah. That's a little more trickier, I think. That's a little
Yeah.
more like, oh, what are they going for here? Is it a metaphor for sex? Is it a metaphor for reproduction? Is it a metaphor for fear?
It could be all those things.
Yeah, and we see a lot of different themes and weird kind of trippy elements that can allude to different elements. I said elements twice, but can allude to different aspects and interpretations, I should say, of the film.
Absolutely, especially with the spider. As far as the Jake Gyllenhaal character himself, first off, I want to say that Enemy is based off I think it's a Portuguese book.
Yes.
I think it's called The Double. So there is kind of something that he's basing it off of. But yeah, so basically it's Jake Gyllenhaal, the history teacher, versus Jake Gyllenhaal, the actor. And it's kind of like a weird mix of his life, and it's so weirdly mixed in there, man, that there is moments in this film where you really don't know. I mean, you kind of know towards the end of the movie, but towards the beginning of the movie and even the middle, you're just like, what is going on? Like, is this a clone? Is this his? I mean, what is? I personally was just like, I don't know what's going on half the time, but it's his battle between his two sides, right? And a lot of it is his commitment with his wife, where his wife is pregnant, and having a pregnant wife kind of it signifies you have to be committed. Your wife is pregnant. You're a real dick if you cheat on your wife when she's pregnant. And it's this whole concept of cheating and being faithful and sticking to one woman and one life that you want to lead versus the other side, which is being open, sleeping with whoever you want, doing whatever you want, acting in cheap movies, following your dreams and sleeping with whatever girl you want to do. Like that kind of no inhibitions kind of lifestyle that Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie wants to lead versus the history teacher, good wife, good apartment, good family, baby on the way, nice, happy, normal, socially acceptable lifestyle.
Right.
Versus having no inhibitions. And it's that we see that in different areas of the film where he is cheating on his wife, but he becomes a different person when he cheats on his wife, literally a different person. And then when he's with his wife, he's somewhat like almost depressed, where he's just not happy because he's committed to one relationship and he's obsessed with women. And we see that with the weird creepy club scene where that
weird, like the sex club,
underground club that we find out, and it's like this thing where you can tell even when he dreams about it, and that's kind of what I got out of it, is that it's this do you want to commit, and the pregnancy represents commitment. Do you want to commit to having this lifestyle, or you want to live the way you want to live and do whatever you want and sleep with whoever you want?
Yeah.
And the spider represents, to me, right, because it's all interpretation, the spider represents that commitment of having that. The spider web is kind of something that's keeping you there. And we see a lot of symbolism of the spider web,
right,
whether it be the window in the
car crash, yeah,
or whether it be the city itself as a spider web, and we obviously see the spider over the city as well. I think that's kind of what the spider represents. I cannot lie. The last shot of this movie freaked the hell out of me. I don't know about you, man, but again, I was watching the movie and I'm like, holy, oh, dear Lord. I cannot lie. I freaked out for two reasons. One, it's obviously a jump scare. Two, I have a major phobia of spiders.
Really?
Oh yeah, okay. I am the Ron Weasley of spider phobia. You know how Ron in the Harry Potter movies hates spiders?
Yeah.
That's me. I hate spiders. That's my one. I hate them so much that when this movie opened and I'm like, oh no, there's spiders in this movie? Yeah. Oh no.
They squashed the spider in the very beginning.
In the very beginning, yeah. I'm like, what are you doing? No, don't do this. I hate spiders. But that's what I got out of it, as like this kind of web of like commitment and this kind of web of being stuck in one place where the baby means I have to be married to this woman. I now have a child with her. I have a child for the rest of my life. I'm stuck. I have this job for the rest of my life. I'm stuck. I have a wife for the rest of my life. I'm stuck. I'm in this spider web. I can't get out of it. And it sucks so bad, which is why I just want to be free, explore, ride my crazy motorcycle, and sleep with hot girls.
Right. And I think that the idea of lust is definitely a prevalent theme from the very beginning. We talked about that club scene. But I think just opening on like his nude pregnant wife is like, oh yeah, this is, he's battling between commitment, but, he's also like lusting over, females and whatnot. And I think that this whole thing with the spider, it's kind of funny because I almost think it's almost like a metaphor for like monogamy, or whether or not that's, we're talking about cheating.
That's kind of what I'm saying too,
and,
right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
It's the concept of like being in one relationship, staying with your wife, or like you said, monogamy, or just being free from it. No monogamy, sleeping with whoever you want, and just being with every woman you want.
Yeah, and that spider web, you brought up a good point with the spider web deal, because it's like, yeah, you're going to be trapped in this web for the
rest of your life.
Well, and even like spiders, like if you get trapped in the web, you're not getting out, and they're gonna kill you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And is monogamy killing this dude? Is it killing his psyche? What's happening here? And again, he's touching on what's the definition of lust. How does that define a man? How does that define his psyche? How does that change his appearance, his personality? And how is that, especially coming from a character who has split personality disorder or multiple personality disorder, he has to reason with, whether or not living this lifestyle is going to make him live one way and pursue his dream of acting or whatever, or is it going to result in him committing, living this lifestyle as a history teacher and whatnot. So it's an interesting movie.
It absolutely, and what you said towards the end kind of hits the nail on the head as far as lust. Is lust as deep as Jake Gyllenhaal's character can go? Is monogamy, is sticking with his wife or monogamy gonna make him depressed and never make him happy? Does he want to pursue happiness? And if happiness means not being with one woman, then is it worth giving up your life, giving up your happiness for a normal life, I guess you want to say, or a non-monogamous life?
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, well, and I think it's also like a bigger issue of like mental illness, kind of going in there as well. Obviously, his wife knows that he has this like split personality thing. So after a while, she just has to come to accept it. She doesn't like tell him, you have a problem, whatever, you have to accept it. And I think that's the only way. I think what the film is saying is that's the only way you're able to treat mental illness, and how you're able to break it is let them come to reason with themselves.
Sure.
And help them take care of themselves, obviously, but make sure that you're able to be open and accept, and and therefore somebody with a mental illness or special needs or whatever are loved and comforted enough to be able to go on that journey themselves.
Absolutely, yeah. My last thing on Enemy is circle. It all comes back full circle.
Yeah,
the
starts
beginning
with
of
the
this
voicemail.
Starts at the end of the movie,
Yeah.
and then it ends at the beginning of the movie. Vice versa. It's one big circle.
Yeah.
The movie is, and I didn't catch that until towards the end, and I was like, oh yeah, the voicemail that my mom left.
Yeah.
Versus being told that her mom called him and left a voicemail. It's the beginning of the movie, towards the end of the movie, all coming full circle. Also, Jake Gyllenhaal in the motorcycle suit, when he's like stalking that girl. That scene's crazy.
Yeah,
that scene's crazy because it really. This is more of acting as far as Jake Gyllenhaal. His acting in that, his just straight up ridiculous swag in that, when he's just chilling on the bike and he's just like walking over this girl and like zoom zoom with his bike and motorcycle. It just shows the two different sides of him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's move on to Sicario. Sicario is a movie that came out, I believe, 2015.
Yeah, 2015.
2015. This was one of my favorites of the year. We did the Schmoes top 10 movies of the year with me, Copster, Cody, and I put this one at pretty much near my top 5, if not my top 3. This movie's crazy.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of this movie hits. This movie is probably the most personal one for me, because this movie's all about my life, dude. I mean, not necessarily my life as far as like I'm a hitman for a cartel, but basically this movie takes place between The border between the U.S. is El Paso Juarez. As everyone knows, I grew up in El Paso Juarez.
Mm,
Whereas a lot of people know, I don't know how many people know, but
right.
I grew up in El Paso for a while. I grew up in Juarez for a while. So this movie kind of takes place in a world that I know very well. My dad worked in Juarez for years.
Mm,
Um, so I know Juarez very well. I literally lived in Juarez, and I know El Paso very well. And then obviously it takes place in Arizona as well, which is where I'm from, where I know the world of Arizona very well. And then has a lot to do with the Cartel of Mexico, the Mexican cartel,
right.
and then the Colombian cartel, which again, ironically enough, I'm Colombian. I'm from Cali, Colombia. So it has a lot of there's a lot to say in this movie personally for me that they kind of touch on, but overall, this movie is amazing. Obviously, it's one of the best movies as far as filmmaking, like you said, as far as building tension and creating pacing, and it's also a lot of commentary on what I feel, at least. There's a lot of humanity at play, but there's also a lot as far as the law
Hmm.
and the United States government
Right.
and how we kind of, or a lot of people who work for the U.S. government kind of see it in one light, as far as like, hey, I'm working for the good guys, but then again, you're just like, wait, am I working for the
Yeah.
good
Who's the good
guys?
guys?
Yeah,
Yeah. Who's
I don't
really
know.
the
What do you
good?
think about this movie?
No, I think this movie is like very anti-war on drugs kind of
Mm-hmm.
deal. It kind of shows the consequences of the war on drugs and how normal people have to reason with those consequences that come through a bigger entity, whether it be the Silvio character, who's just a regular cop for the Mexican state government, who is forced into this cartel world, and as a result, he ends up like losing his life, losing his family, and his family losing him, I should say. And it's like again, it's an underlying idea of corruption within like on that side of the border. But meanwhile, our main central character is Kate, Emily Blunt, who is a FBI, I believe FBI, right?
Yeah, she is.
Who, the start of the film opens up with them doing a raid on a house, finding all these weird bodies, and there's like what's happening. And long story short, she becomes recruited by the government to be part of like the special task force to go in and then do some investigation, which is like, okay, the only reason, which we find out towards the end, the only reason they brought her in is so they could be like, sanctioned and approved to do this mission.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, man. I mean, she's the moral compass of this movie. She's the only one with like an unbreakable morality, but like the whole question of morality just constantly comes into play, especially with the Benicio del Toro character, Alejandro, who is a guy who he's the bad guy, but he plays both sides of the border.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And he's working for the U.S. government.
He's working for the government, but he's also working on his own. He has his own agenda. He's working towards, he's a mercenary. He's trying to find redemption for the loss of his family. But the only way he can find redemption is through finding like the cartel leaders of his, of that, and continuing the cycle of violence.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. You see like how the violence and the intensity of these situations could cause like a dehumanization of these characters. We see it with Josh Brolin, playing, I think his name is Matt Gravy or whatever, and he and his character is like, oh, I just don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And you gotta imagine like he's probably been in Emily Blunt's shoes before, but after a while, just like who cares?
This is just
like,
how the world works.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the only way he could see solving the problem is through violence, is through implementing the force of that he has. And I think the film kind of condemns all of the characters in a certain way, but it's also saying it's not going to change. You know what I mean? It's saying that violence is going to continue to beget violence, but that's the only way that violent people are going to see the means of solving their issues.
Sure. As far as me personally connecting to this movie, again, I'm gonna talk about this movie a lot on a personal level because again, that's kind of how it hits me. Especially not just with the concepts of the movie and the film, but also with the concepts of the kind of movies that Latinos are in. Being someone who is Latino, this is what we get. We get a lot of cartel, a lot of drug war, drug pin, drug. This is pretty much, and I'm not just trying to say like boo-hoo poor us, but I'm trying to say like this is the story that we're being told. And I talked about this with my mom a lot because obviously she's from Colombia and she grew up in Colombia and she grew up in all this, but I talked to her a lot about how the the Pablo Escobar drug craziness that happened in the 80s and in the 90s of Colombia, and how it's such a significantly powerful moment within the world that it's going to be a while till the Latino culture kind of lets that down, or even Colombian culture specifically lets that down. As far as like, when are we going to live this down? It's like the Roman Empire, right, where the gladiators were. It's such a crazy thing that there was gladiators that we keep making movies about it, right?
Yeah.
It's such a crazy thing that this one drug pin controlled pretty much like 85% of the world's cocaine, and created like, became like his own freaking military in a way,
Right.
and just led off to different types of cartels, which is the Mexican cartel that we have now. It's gonna be a while till the Latinos let that down. I'm hoping that Hollywood kind of picks up other stories as well. But for now, I'm in the ride. I'm in the journey as far as what it's going, because there's shows like Narcos that have talked about this as well. But it's something that, again, I've always been on the two sides of, because I am Mexican and I am Colombian, so I am the Colombian lifestyle and the Colombian world and what they went through with Escobar, and the Mexican lifestyle. And when I lived in El Paso and I lived in Juarez, I have those two sides of me, because of my mom and my dad, and living across the border, because I lived in border towns my whole life. So I see the border issues firsthand, and that's why I'm so passionate about concept of immigration and concept of people trying to live, and you're literally putting up a wall saying you can't live, and how there's a line dividing two nations, and both sides are humans,
Right.
and we're trying desperately to keep each other out. And it's something that I've always, this is my life, right? It's always something that I'm going to be a part of. But it's also the concept of like Benicio del Toro's character, and the concept of like the CIA, right? Because in Narcos, I don't know if you've seen Narcos, but
No,
this
I haven't,
last
no.
season of Narcos touched on this very much. And we have freaking Tom Cruise's movie in theaters right now, touching on it right now too, which is, I don't know if you know, American Made.
Yeah. Well, in that show, Snowfall on FX, like I did some work on that show, and it's a great. John Singleton is the executive producer, and it's all about how the CIA was just bringing in drugs.
That's what I'm saying. So
to
it's about the
community, so.
CIA, and Narcos touches on it too. It's the CIA kind of working with the Colombian cartel in a way to make like a deal, being like, hey, if you promise to be chill, we'll let you kind of import drugs and shit, and we'll be cool with it. And then Narcos touches on that, and this one touches on it too, because Josh Brolin at the end of the movie says, you know, people are always going to be addicted to this shit. Why do we try and stop it? Instead of trying to stop it, we're going to work with people who can keep a cool head, which is the Colombians, which is what Benicio del Toro represents, because he's Medellin. Medellin is a city in Colombia, and that's like the Escobar cartel where it was from.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And then they keep calling him Medellin in the movie. All the Mexicans call him Medellin. Even the cartel, the Mexican cartel
Right,
boss
boss.
calls him Medellin. And then he represents the Colombian cartel, and the Colombian cartel is what the U.S. government wants to work with, and the Mexican cartel is too much of a loose cannon. It's too much craziness and too much violence and too much. You don't know if you can work with him. Whereas like the Colombians, you know you can. So what you do is you set loose the Colombian dog.
Mercenary,
I
yeah.
guess he's actually a dog in a way. Benicio del Toro's character. You let him loose, let him take out the competition, which is the Mexican cartel, and then you can work with the Colombians, who are much more sensible and who are willing to work with the U.S. government, whereas the Mexicans are not. And it's also kind of a Suicide Squad kind of scenario, right?
Yeah.
Because if people kind of have an open mind about it and find out about it, it's like you can play dumb. You could be like, well, the Colombians and the Mexicans were at war, and that's why the Colombian guy killed the Mexican guy. We had nothing to do with it. The U.S. government had nothing to do with it. It's the Colombians and the Mexicans fighting, and it's almost kind of that scapegoat you can have.
Yeah. And that just goes through like all of American history, whether it
Exactly.
be pinning, whether it be pinning, Asian Americans against other Asian Americans, whether it be pinning African Americans against like the home, the motherland. We'll talk about this in another episode.
Yeah.
If we ever get to like a Spike Lee episode,
We will.
Yeah,
Trust me,
I'll
we
be
will.
passionate. But
But for me, final
yeah.
thought, real quick, because I know I kind of ranted a little bit. But
No, it's fine, yeah.
final thing I want to say is the concept of the U.S. government allowing this craziness to happen, and that's kind of the reality of the situation, where the good guy isn't really the good guy, and the top dog in this whole situation is telling you that going by the book doesn't exist anymore. The higher you go up, the lower down you are on the totem pole, the more they teach you go by the book, follow the rules, and the higher you go up, the more they're like, dude, toss that book out. That doesn't
Right.
exist. This is the real world now. If you're gonna be doing some top dog decisions, and if you're gonna be taking out some top dog people, then you're gonna get your hands dirty.
Right. And for me, my last word on Sicario, it's obviously a movie that focuses a lot on what the nature of violence means, what the nature of morality means. How does that prevalate into like little characters, into individual stories? How does this war on drugs really impact the land of Mexico? And it's brilliant. You know, again, we're talking about Roger Deakins' great cinematography, the use of beige. Like, there's no black or white here. You know, the first time we see Emily Blunt actually is through like one of the first times we see her is through security footage that is black or white. You know, one of the last times we see her is through the night vision goggles that's green, or you know the overall color palette is like beige. You know, I mean, there's no like central idea of what we're supposed to
Feel.
feel. You know, there's no right or wrong answer. The answer, the with the circumstances that we've been given, the only choice you can make is either stick to your grounds of morality or just play on whatever side you want to play on. And I think it's brilliant, even with the cinematography, even with the shots of like showing like the helicopter shots over the border, where
Sure.
you just see like it's like this very similar looking kind of land, America on this side, Mexico on this side, but it's just all like this little fence that just causes this uproar and violence and all this stuff. So it's crazy.
Kind of going on that point, going back on prisoners and that gray thing that we see so much in Denis films is the concept of not black, not white, but gray moral areas is something that we see in all of Denis films. Let's jump to Arrival real quick.
Yeah.
Arrival is a masterpiece. It really is. It came out last year and it blew people's minds. And there's a reason why. I know you have a connection towards Arrival because you really love this movie.
Yeah, that was my favorite movie of 2016.
That's right.
To me, this is the definition of a perfect movie. To me,
Yeah.
you know, when I watched this film, I was mind blown. The idea that you could manipulate the art of film so well and so seamlessly, that you can manipulate the audience into thinking, oh, these are all like flashbacks to an earlier time, or really flash forwards. And you know, there's this popular thing that they teach in film school. Like, no, if you go to film school for one day, you're gonna get this hammered into you. Is like the Kuleshov effect. You know what I mean? Like that whole idea of like you could take this one shot of like a weirdo looking at a baby, and it'll just like look like it's innocent. But you could take the same shot, the exact same actor, exact same expression, looking at like a hot woman, and it'll be like, oh, that guy's a creep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So in this movie, they use that to like the maximum effect, where it's like, oh, time. Yeah, they open with like this thing what we perceive to be a flashback of, you know, Amy Adams, and we only perceive that because like the language of film dictates that, you know, we have to do that. But meanwhile, later on in the movie, we learn that, oh, these are really flash forwards, and these are all part of the non-linear thinking that inhabits Amy Adams. So again, it's brilliant. They dive deep into a lot of like philosophy and like linguistics that I've been like interested in studying for a long time. They obviously have that whole thing of the Suffer-Ward thesis, which is like the structure of language determines the way like your brain works and behavioral characteristics, and we see that being implemented. But that's the first time we've ever seen that idea used in science fiction, where it's like, oh, if aliens come in and you have to learn alien language, you're going to start thinking like an alien, you're going to start thinking non-linearly. And I think that's one of the most brilliant examples of just, hey, this is, we've had film for over 100 years, but here's something original for you, you know, and here's something that's digestible in a way that works, that feels natural. And yeah, to me, it's a perfect movie. All the acting around the board is brilliant.
It's absolutely brilliant. The cinematography by Bradford Young.
Bradford Young, yeah, he Deakins wasn't available to shoot this. He was working on Hell Caesar with the Coen brothers, and having Bradford Young, and again, we talk about a lot of Villeneuve's films being this element of realism and neorealism. How they're able to incorporate that into science fiction is very interesting. I mean, you see like these kind of we talk about like the bleakness and all that stuff, but you know, having so much of the film be dependent on light, to the point where our literal introduction and presentation of the aliens is through a giant white light,
Yep.
right? So it's like,
And then black and white.
and yes, it's yeah, exactly. So and yeah, them being like blacks like silhouettes kind of deal. So it's interesting that they're able to incorporate like the look of dirty. They call it dirty science fiction of
Dirty
like
sci-fi.
yeah. So it's like you take a look into like the grittier, realistic. If this was a science fiction movie, this is probably if this was gonna happen, this is probably how it will look. You know what I mean? This is probably how it will feel. This
It's
is
less futuristic.
yeah, it's less futuristic, but it's very utopian. You know what I mean? It's very much like we have to rely on each other. We have to rely on communication. We have to start talking to each other and start using our brains, putting our brains together in order for problem solving to start. And you know, it came out in 2016, which is a big year of like division and whatnot.
And it didn't even start the
Yeah. I mean, they're filming this back,
Yeah.
you know, back in like 2014.
Yeah, they didn't know how
2015, so-
bad it was gonna get.
Right. So,
Now it's way worse.
but I think in the end, it also, and I think that's what's so brilliant about it. Like, even though it's this real dark, real gritty science fiction thing, it ultimately offers like a bright solution.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I think there's probably one of the only like Denis Villeneuve films with like a
Yeah,
happy
like a
ending.
happy ending. That's so
Yeah.
true. That's very true. I'm gonna say a quick words on it just because we're kind of running out of time. To me, the reason why I love this movie so much is that it's all about communication, and it's the most realistic possibility of what happens if aliens came to Earth. I love it because it's all about language. It's all about what is language, what is communication. It's not just words, but it's the way we think. And we think in a very linear way because that's kind of how our language is. And what happens if we stop thinking linear and
Right.
we start thinking forwards and backwards. So
Right.
any last words on it? Just because I want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of want to pose this question. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who say that Arrival is like a movie that promotes like a pro-life agenda. You know, is because of the fact that Amy Adams knows that her daughter is gonna.
yeah, I don't see that. I don't.
Yeah,
Maybe, but I see it more as just like, just the keeping possibilities open, even though you know that the possibilities aren't going to end up the way you want it to. I guess.
Right, and that's a question that's even posed by the Jeremy Renner character. Like, if you know our daughter's gonna die, why would you still
Have her.
Yeah, but I kind of want to combat that too. There's a quote from Denis Villeneuve where he says like that definitely wasn't the intention, and in fact they were going out of their way to make sure in adapting the story. The movie's based on a short story from Ted Chiang called "The Story of My Life" or "Story of Your
Oh
Life."
yeah, right.
Yeah, so and that was the original title for the movie. But the whole idea is that you know, the original source material was like, oh, the daughter dies at a much older age and she dies from a rock climbing accident. But in the film, Villeneuve and the screenwriter actually readjusted that theme by making it she dies from unavoidable natural causes and she dies at a much younger age. So there's nothing really she could do, and doing that, it's not an idea of we're gonna give birth to her and knowing she's gonna die. Is that Louise chooses to make that choice, you know?
Yeah, and the fact that she chooses to tell Renner,
Yeah.
knowing that he's probably gonna divorce her for that reason.
Right.
That's another thing too. If you know the future, if you know someone's future, do you tell them? Do you say, "Hey, this is what's going to happen," knowing that they might not take that in a positive way?
Right. And it's especially like heartbreaking knowing. I mean, it was not officially confirmed in the movie, but there's that whole idea that her daughter actually ends up dying because of her interaction and communication with the aliens, which I think is like really unfortunate. Well, it's kind of like one of the more bleaker interpretations of the movie, but again, I think this is one of the landmark movies of all time. I think this is one of the best looks at science fiction. You know, is obviously nominated for, I believe, 8 Academy Awards, including a Best Director nomination for Villeneuve, Best Picture. No Amy Adams nomination, unfortunately.
Yeah,
which
you
is
were really
heartbreaking.
you were fighting for that.
I thought that was the performance of the year. I
Yeah.
thought that should have won.
Yeah,
Like,
you were fighting
maybe
for
get
that. I
nominated,
remember
so-
that. Yeah, you were
Yeah.
like, "Dude, nominate her," and I was like, "Yeah, maybe."
Yeah, the score by Johan Johansson.
Ooh, that score is so good.
Yeah,
And it's used so well.
Yeah, and they take a lot of pieces from that, from like Max Richard, theme that came out in like 2002 or something like that. I can't remember exactly which movie it's from, but they adapt a lot of. See, that's the reason I didn't get nominated for an original score. They actually adopt a lot of different scores in it. But like the eeriness, the kind of like overlapping. They use like an overlapping asianago to keep the intensity rising through the music. So it's like every time like you see the aliens come up, it's like a drone, like a, you know what I mean, and it just keeps it like building and intensifying. So I really enjoy it for that aspect of it.
Absolutely. It's again, it's a masterpiece in filmmaking. It's a masterpiece in thinking. And it's a huge commentary on our society, especially today, as far as communication and as far as working together and what's it going to take for humanity to successfully work as one. And is it going to take something horrific, or can it take something good? Can it take something positive?
Right.
And also how language can change our mind, and how what we feed inside our brain and what we feed inside these ears can literally dictate our actions, our thoughts, and our perspective in the world, and our perspective on life, because it's the concept of who are you listening to, and what are they telling you, and how does that translate to the way you choose to live your life, and the way not just you live your life, but you view the world. I feel like that's key, because it's like how you view the world is eventually how humanity will work together or destroy each other.
Right.
All right, guys, that's our episode for today. Again, we got into some crazy things with Denis Villeneuve. We're very much excited for Blade Runner 2049. Just keep up with us on Twitter to hear our thoughts on that. I'm at Squad Leader Race. RB3 is at RB3 Schmoes.
Yep,
and we're going to be here talking about more directors that you want to hear about. Let us know what you thought about Denis Villeneuve's films, and let us know what other directors you would like us to talk about in the comments down below. Make sure you keep it positive and keep it happy, guys. I'm Ace. This is RB3.
Yes, sir.
And we are peacing out.